I used to believe in symmetry, in balance, in the quiet illusion that if you gave love, it came back to you like the tide, maybe not immediately, but eventually. That belief died the night I found the receipt. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that hums with routine. Work, coffee, emails, a call with the bank, then home to pasta that smells like hope. Elise had made dinner, like she always did. Chicken Alfredo, candles, and that glass of red wine she only poured when she wanted something. Or was hiding something. That night, it was both. She laughed too easily, touched my arm too softly, and God help me, I wanted to believe it was just love. But even love can be weaponized when it's wielded by someone who knows exactly how to use it. I found the receipt the next morning, jammed between our tax documents in the study drawer I was sure only I used. $1,250. Jewelry. Charged 3 days ago. Not from any store I recognized, some boutique in the next city over. She never mentioned going. At first, it was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. But you keep digging when you love someone. That's the sick part. You need to prove yourself wrong. The next clue came from Jamie. Jamie's 9. My son. My heartbeat. If there's anything pure left in my world, it's him. The kid's quiet, too quiet for his age, but beneath that silence is something sharp. I used to think it was just sensitivity. Now I wonder if he always knew. Mom went out on Saturday, he said, picking at his cereal like it offended him. Said she was with Aunt Claire. But Aunt Claire called and said she's in Denver. The spoon dropped from my hand, clattering against the porcelain bowl. Elise lied. Casually. Smoothly. With no tremble in her voice. That's when I started watching her more closely. Over the next week, my wife became a stranger in familiar skin. The woman I fell in love with, the one who once left poems in my coat pocket, was replaced by a ghost that smiled with precision, kissed with distraction, and always kept her phone face down. I planted a small camera in her car. I hacked her calendar. I used a disposable GPS tracker synced to my laptop. Don't look at me like that. You'd do it too, if your world was unraveling thread by thread, and the only way to stop it was to become the monster you feared. The footage confirmed everything. A hotel. Room 415. Different cars pulling up over the course of a week. A man with salt and pepper hair and a wallet fat enough to buy silence. I traced him, Elise's business consultant. His name was Marcus Fielding. Married. 2 kids. He ran a hedge fund with a reputation for eating companies alive and spitting out bones. I confronted her. Not with shouting, not with tears. Just silence. I played the video, and I watched her face. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She said, "You don't understand." I had to. She left that night. Not in shame, but with the cold dignity of a woman who believes she's already won. Jamie didn't say anything when she walked out. He just watched from the staircase, his small face carved from stone. But then something happened I didn't expect. He came into my study the next morning, holding a small, worn notebook. "I've been keeping track," he said simply. Inside were names, dates, screenshots, bank transfers, passwords. He'd been watching her, too longer than I had. "She thinks I don't understand," he said, his voice flat. "But I do." I looked at him then, not as a child, but as something else entirely. A mind forged in the fire of betrayal, sharper than either of us deserved. I said, "Jamie, what do you want to do?" He looked up at me, unblinking. "Let her fall," he whispered. "But make her think it's her idea." Elise's side of the bed stayed untouched for days. At first, I left it made, a shrine to what was. But after a week, I tore the sheets off like skin from a wound. Her scent lingered, vanilla and something more bitter. Maybe that's what betrayal smells like, sweet until it turns your stomach. Jamie didn't ask where she was. He didn't need to. And that scared me more than anything else. Most nights, I found him at his desk with 2 monitors glowing in the dark like twin moons. Not playing games. Not watching cartoons. Code. Graphs. Spreadsheets. He learned Python, Linux, and crypto security protocols by watching YouTube in secret over the past year. While I was busy surviving the slow decay of my marriage, my son had been building an arsenal. Elise moved 70 grand into a private brokerage last month, he said one night, casually, like he was telling me the weather. I blinked. "You mean your mom?" "No," he said, without hesitation. "Elise." I should have corrected him. I didn't. He slid a flash drive across the table. "There's more. She's setting up something offshore. Marcus is helping. Cayman Islands, multiple shell core. She's bleeding us slowly, Dad. This isn't just an affair, it's a takeover." The room spun a little. My hands went cold. I thought I was the betrayed one, but I hadn't even scratched the surface. That weekend, I drove out to see Elise. She was staying in some sterilized condo across town. High-end but soulless, all white walls and minimalist furniture. She opened the door wearing a silk robe and no makeup, and for a second, just a second, I saw the woman I married. Then she smiled like a wolf. "You've been digging," she said before I could speak. "It doesn't suit you. You're siphoning our money," I said flatly. "You think I won't fight back?" She laughed. "You can try, but it won't end well for you. I know the law better. I've covered every trail. You're a liability now, not a partner." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why, but I didn't. Because I finally understood something. She didn't just fall out of love. She weaponized it. Back home, Jamie had already started phase 1. He'd cloned her phone weeks ago using a side-loaded app and a burner Android device hidden behind the Wi-Fi router. Every text, every call, every note in her digital planner synced silently to our private server. "We can't take her head-on," he said, tapping away. "She's too careful." What do we do then? We let her think she's winning. We give her enough leash to run, and then hang herself with it. That night, we created an alias. Jamie called him the archivist, a tech consultant, an anonymous broker of information. We leaked false data into Elise's stolen accounts, phony investment tips, doctored portfolio suggestions. Jamie routed it all through encrypted darknet channels. She bit hard. Within a week, she moved nearly 50,000 into a bogus blockchain startup based on fake documents we'd crafted together. Jamie handled the white paper. I wrote the emails. She never saw it coming. She was unraveling. Slowly. Privately. Then something strange happened. I got a call from Marcus Fielding's office. A secretary, shaky voice, asking if I had any idea where he was. He'd gone off the grid. No calls. No activity. His car was still in the parking garage of his company, untouched. Elise hasn't seen him either. She texted me the same day. Something's wrong. He wouldn't just vanish. And for the first time, I believed her. At dinner, I pushed the broccoli around my plate, lost in thought. Jamie was quiet, too. His laptop sat open beside him, screen dimmed but still running. "You think we went too far?" I asked finally. He looked up at me, eyes unreadable. "Marcus isn't gone because of us," he said. "He was running 5 different Ponzi schemes. Someone else got to him first." I swallowed hard. "You're sure?" Jamie nodded. I checked the deep net boards. There's chatter. A bounty was out on him for months. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Then he said something that changed everything. But Elise doesn't know that. And that's the next move. We crafted a message. A single, cryptic email sent to her anonymous account from a burner domain. "He trusted you. Now he's gone. You're next." Within 24 hours, Elise was spiraling. She withdrew another 20,000 in cash. Checked into a hotel under a fake name. Jamie had eyes on her the entire time. Her paranoia became our fuel. We weren't destroying her. She was doing it herself. But as the line between justice and cruelty began to blur, something inside me started to shift. I looked at Jamie one night, my son, my partner in quiet war, and I didn't see a boy anymore. I saw something colder, smarter, hungrier. And I started to wonder, was I still leading this? Or was I just a pawn in his game? The longer this went on, the more I understood how Elise got away with it for so long. Betrayal doesn't happen in loud, obvious ways. It's quiet, surgical, a series of compromises made under the illusion of control. A small lie here, a private account there, one password changed, one evening unaccounted for, until suddenly you're standing in your own home, surrounded by strangers, and everything you thought was yours no longer answers to your name. That was where I was now, except the stranger wasn't Elise anymore. It was Jamie. The day Marcus Fielding's body was found, the news didn't make national headlines. A short article. Drowned, they said. Car found near a lake outside the city. Suicide was the official theory. No foul play suspected. Elise disappeared the same day. She didn't call, didn't text. Her social media accounts went dark. Her last GPS ping came from a roadside motel an hour north. Then nothing. At first, I thought she was running from guilt. Maybe fear. But Jamie thought otherwise. "She's not running," he said, pointing to a digital map strewn with activity logs, timestamps, bank pings. "She's preparing." "For what?" He looked at me, his face pale in the blue glow of the monitors. "For war." The next few days were a blur of anxiety and tension. I couldn't sleep. Jamie barely did either. We ran scenario after scenario. What if Elise suspected us? What if she'd hired someone? What if this had never been about Marcus at all? Then Jamie found something. A hidden document buried in a backup folder on Elise's cloud storage, one she'd forgotten to lock down. It was titled Everest. Inside, outlines, spreadsheets, and diagrams. It was a long-term strategy. A scorched earth plan. Elise had intended to gut me financially and legally, frame me for tax fraud, and walk away with custody of Jamie. Everything had been timed to detonate after she and Marcus had moved their assets overseas. But Marcus was dead, and without him, the timing was off. Still, the plan was too far along. Pieces were already in motion. Elise couldn't just stop it now. She could only try to finish it. That night, I found Jamie sitting in the dark, hoodie up, staring at the screen. "I finished the protocol," he said softly. "It's ready." "What protocol?" "The countermeasure." He slid a folder toward me. "Encrypted. Password protected." He built it from scratch, an automated cascade of hacks, leaks, and account freezes. Once activated, it would take down every asset Elise had stashed away, expose her private communications, and trigger an audit by the IRS and SEC simultaneously. "Jamie, this is nuclear." She went nuclear first. I wanted to argue. I wanted to protect him from the weight of what we were doing. But how do you protect someone who's already miles ahead of you? He'd been building this for months. Watching. Recording. Preparing. Not because I asked him to, but because he knew no one else would. The next day, Elise came back. I found her in the kitchen, like nothing had happened. Making tea. Wearing a soft blue sweater that used to be my favorite on her. "I missed the house," she said, smiling faintly. "Missed you too." I stared at her, numb. "Marcus is dead." "I know," she whispered. "It wasn't supposed to end that way. He got sloppy." "And your plan?" She looked up at me with a strange tenderness. "Was never about money. Or Marcus. It was about escape. I was drowning here, and you never saw it. I had to become someone else. I didn't know how to ask you to let me go. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to forgive her and damn her all in the same breath. But then I saw it, the flash drive dangling from her keychain. Jamie's flash drive. She'd found it. "I know what you did," she said, voice shaking. "All of it." I stepped back. She stepped forward. "We're past revenge now," she said. "You think you can destroy me? You taught our son how to weaponize me. You created this." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Jamie was standing behind her. "I didn't need to be taught," he said calmly. "I learned it watching both of you." She turned slowly. Her face changed, just for a moment. A flicker of something raw. Not fear. Recognition. "You're not a child anymore," she whispered. "I never was," he replied. Jamie activated the protocol that night. I watched in silence as Elise's world collapsed in real time. Accounts froze. Emails flooded in. Legal notices. Calls from people she hadn't heard from in years, suddenly demanding explanations. The illusion shattered. And then she was gone. Left without a word. Weeks passed. Peace, if you could call it that, returned. But the silence between Jamie and me wasn't the comfortable kind. It was full of unspoken truths and haunted glances. He was brilliant. But brilliance forged in betrayal leaves scars. I found him one night watching an old home video. Elise, laughing, holding Jamie as a baby, back when everything looked real. He turned to me. "She did love us," he said. "Just not more than she loved herself." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. In the weeks after Elise vanished, our house became quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Not peaceful. Not healing. Just paused. Like the breath before a scream. Jamie started locking his door. I started avoiding mirrors. Grief is strange when it comes tangled with vindication. I'd won, if you could call it that. Elise had been dismantled, not by lawyers or courtrooms, but by the same web of deception she spun so masterfully. We'd gutted her plan, frozen her funds, burned her aliases. And yet, every time I looked at Jamie, I wondered if I'd lost something much greater. It was a Tuesday again, a Tuesday that the package arrived. No return address. Just my name, in that same cursive script Elise always used on birthday cards. Elegant. Controlled. Inside, a flash drive and a handwritten note. "You never knew me. But Jamie does. Ask him about the first account." I stood at the kitchen counter, note in hand, as the coffee burned on the stove. My chest tightened. The first account? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to ask Jamie. But Elise had never wasted words. If she left a clue, it was deliberate. That night, I knocked on his door. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even ask how I knew. I was going to tell you, he said, sliding a small metal box out from under his bed. Eventually, inside, a second hard drive. Black. Labeled in Jamie's handwriting. Archive A1. Pre-Everest. I started keeping this the day I saw her with Marcus, he said quietly. Not the first time. The real first time. Over a year ago. He pulled up folders. Dozens of them. Photos. Audio files. Phone call recordings. Screen captures of text messages. I recognized names I'd never heard before. Transactions. Travel documents. Even security footage. Elise in other cities. Elise with other men. Not just Marcus. She'd been building the Everest plan for 3 years. And Marcus wasn't the beginning. He was the end. She wasn't running from us, Jamie said, voice flat. She was running from someone else. What do you mean? She stole from him. He pointed to a name on the screen. I didn't recognize it at first. Jamie tapped again, opening a profile with blurry surveillance photos and offshore account logs. You see that guy? His name's Casimir Delenko. Private investor. Former intelligence. She cleaned out one of his dummy accounts in Zurich. Millions. That's why Marcus died. And why she disappeared. I staggered back, heart pounding. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a Cold War. Jamie had known. He traced it all. And for some reason, he hadn't told me. Why keep this from me? I asked. He didn't look at me. Because I wasn't sure whose side you were on. I sat in the study that night, hands shaking, playing the flash drive Elise had sent. It was a video. Grainy. Recorded on her phone. She sat in a dark room, eyes ringed with exhaustion, wearing the sweater I gave her for our 10th anniversary. If you're seeing this, it means Jamie's finished what I started. She gave a tired smile. Don't blame him. Everything he knows, he learned watching you. How you hide. How you compartmentalize. How you teach people to feel safe while keeping them in the dark. I stopped the video. For a long time, I just stared at the floor. Because she wasn't lying. Jamie and I didn't talk for days. He left the drive with me. I watched every file, every detail he'd compiled. It wasn't just about Elise. It was about me. The emails I deleted. The suspicious transfers I thought were private. The gambling debts from 10 years ago. My hidden shame. My own betrayals. Jamie hadn't just uncovered Elise's secrets. He'd cataloged both of us. The next Sunday, I found him sitting on the back porch, laptop on his knees, eyes scanning the horizon. Tell me the truth, I said. Are you still tracking her? He didn't look up. Yes. Why? Because she's still playing. And we're not done. I sat beside him. For the first time in weeks, he let me. You think she's coming back? He hesitated. She already has. Jamie showed me the latest ping. A shell company created 2 days ago. One Elise had tried to use once before back when she was building Everest. Only this time, the signatures weren't hers. They were mine. She was framing me. One final checkmate. We need to go public, I said. Tell the authorities. Hand everything over. Jamie shook his head. That won't work. She's already 3 moves ahead. Then what the hell do we do? He turned to me slowly. His eyes didn't look like a boy's anymore. We burn it all. We end the game, not just for her. For everyone. That night, he handed me a final folder. Locked behind a biometric key. What's this? I asked. He looked at me for a long time. The contingency. Inside were plans I didn't know he'd written. A sequence of controlled leaks. Whistleblower documents. Government-level blackmail files. Evidence that didn't just take down Elise, but the entire web she operated within. Including Casimir Delenko. Including me. You were never supposed to open this, he said. Unless you thought I was gone. Jamie, what is this? I built a failsafe, he said. Because someone has to survive this. And if it's not me, it has to be the truth. I couldn't sleep after Jamie showed me the contingency plan. It sat on my desk like a loaded gun, harmless until opened, devastating once triggered. He hadn't just prepared to expose Elise. He prepared to expose me. Everything I'd ever buried, my financial recklessness in my 30s, the hush money I paid to keep my father's failing company afloat, the account I opened in the Cayman Islands under a pseudonym the same year Jamie was born. Things Elise never knew. Things no one knew. Except my son. And maybe Elise. I stared at the encrypted folder until dawn. A single biometric scan would open it. Jamie's thumbprint. My retina. We were the only keys. Or so I thought. By Monday morning, we were no longer watching Elise. She was watching us. It started with the lawyer. A man in a navy suit knocked on our door just after breakfast. Clean-cut, polite, with a voice like sandpaper and legalese that made my stomach twist. Elise Varnell has filed an emergency motion to seize shared assets, he said, on grounds of fraud, breach of trust, and endangerment of a minor. He handed me the folder, neatly printed, signed, dated. Jamie read it over my shoulder, expression unreadable. She's accusing you of everything she did, he said finally. She always was better at disguising herself as the victim, I muttered, flipping through the false narratives, the forged bank statements, the call logs doctored to paint me as paranoid, violent, and unstable. It was a masterstroke. And the piece de resistance? She claimed Jamie had been manipulated by me, that I'd coerced a minor into illegal surveillance activities and compromised his psychological development through obsessive behavior following marital collapse. She was not just trying to destroy me. She was trying to take Jamie. She's going to try for custody, I said quietly. Jamie didn't respond. He just stared at the wall. Do you trust me? I asked. His jaw clenched. Do you? He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected, doubt. The week that followed was a spiral of attorneys, freezing accounts, preparing counterfilings. But none of it mattered, because every step I took, Elise was a step ahead. Emails were intercepted. Evidence we planned to present to the judge disappeared from our cloud backups. A hard drive we'd stored in a bank safe deposit box was wiped clean. Jamie's contingency plan had been traced and flagged by 3 intelligence networks. Whoever Elise was working with now had global reach. Delinko, Jamie whispered. She got back in with him. Or someone worse. We were no longer in control. We were inside the machine Elise had built. And then the letter arrived. Not to me. To Jamie. Unmarked envelope. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Inside, one photo. Elise. In a black coat. Standing in front of an airport security terminal. And beside her, another child. A girl. 7, maybe 8. Jamie's hands shook as he held the photo. Who's that? I asked. His mouth opened. Closed. And then he whispered, my sister. The truth unraveled fast after that. Elise had a second family. A second child. Born while we were still married. Conceived with Marcus or possibly Delinko. The timeline was blurred. Hidden. But Jamie had known something. Felt something. For months, he'd been tracking unexplained fund transfers Elise had made to an address in Prague. A trust. A child's education fund. He thought it was a cover for another shell company. It wasn't. It was her daughter. Her backup. Her exit strategy. Elise hadn't just manipulated us. She'd duplicated us. She replaced us, Jamie said that night, his voice empty. We were a rehearsal. A test run. She took everything she learned from breaking us and built her perfect family. I didn't know what to say, because he was right. But then Jamie did something I didn't expect. He wiped the contingency. Every copy. Every drive. Every archive. What are you doing? I asked, panicking. She wants us to play, he said. She wants us to burn down everything to reach her. To lose our humanity one stroke at a time. He turned to me, eyes glassy. I'm not giving her the satisfaction. That night, I dreamed of Elise standing over me, smiling, her hands holding strings. And I on my knees was dancing. The next morning, Jamie was gone. Left nothing behind but a single note. I'm not running. I'm hunting. I'll find her. I'll find the girl. And I'll decide who deserves to survive. Jamie vanished for 6 days. 6 days without a trace. No pings. No emails. The surveillance software he once built now turned back against me, wiped clean like a slate before judgment. It was like he'd never existed. The house was a tomb. Every object suddenly had meaning. The hoodie slung over the armrest, the laptop with the cracked key, the chessboard we'd left mid-game. His presence echoed louder in absence than it ever did in the flesh. I didn't call the police. What would I say? My son, a minor with military-grade encryption skills and knowledge of international finance, has disappeared on a mission to find his mother's second child, possibly to dismantle her entire life. Or maybe just to stare her down and decide whether she's worth saving. They'd arrest me. And maybe they should. On the 7th day, I got a message. Encrypted. No traceable origin. Just 3 words. She trained me. Attached was a video feed. Live. A security cam in a dim room. Walls lined with file cabinets and surveillance monitors. One of them showed Elise, her face haggard, her hair darker, almost unrecognizable. She sat alone, staring at nothing. And beside her, the girl. The one from the photo. My daughter. Or Marcus's. Or Delinko's. We still didn't know. She couldn't have been more than 8, sitting cross-legged on the floor, playing with a tablet. Jamie's voice came through a second audio stream. "I've been here for 12 hours, he said. "They think I'm just some runaway tech prodigy. But I'm not in the system as me. I used one of her old aliases." "What are you doing, Jamie?" I whispered into the screen. There was a pause. Then, learning how deep the maze goes. He called it the labyrinth. Not a building. Not a server farm. A network. Of safe houses, caches, digital blind spots. Elise had created it after Everest failed. A shadow system for if things ever went nuclear. Not just to disappear, but to rebuild and to groom her successor. She hadn't just run with her daughter. She'd started training her. There were puzzles. Intelligence tests. Behavioral conditioning. Jamie found a room lined with screens, each streaming pre-recorded lectures, Elise's voice, teaching the girl how to read people, how to manipulate, how to identify power and fear. "She's trying to make another version of me," Jamie said. "But perfect. Without the empathy." "Then get out," I said. "You don't owe her anything. You don't owe that anything." He didn't answer. That night, the stream cut out. And for the first time since Elise left, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Terror. Not for myself. Not even for Jamie. But for the little girl. The one being sculpted like a weapon. By a mother who only knew how to build things designed to break. 2 days passed. Then Jamie came back. He stood in the doorway just before dawn, his face thinner, older. His hoodie soaked from rain. He didn't say a word. Just walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat down like he hadn't disappeared for over a week. I stared at him, unsure if he was real. "Did you find her?" I asked. He nodded. "And the girl?" "Her name is Lyra," he said softly. The silence that followed was deafening. "Is she your sister?" I asked. He looked down at the floor, then back at me. "She's me. All over again." Jamie didn't tell me everything at once. Pieces came out over the next few days. He gained access to the labyrinth through one of Elise's former tech handlers, a man named Roth. Jamie blackmailed him using old footage of illegal data seizures Elise had recorded years prior. From there, it was a matter of playing a role. He pretended to be a runaway genius, an orphan prodigy seeking a new system. Elise had been skeptical, but Roth convinced her. She allowed Jamie in, not knowing who he was at first. Until she did. "I saw it in her eyes," Jamie said. "The moment she realized." She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. She smiled. And then she made him a proposition. "She offered me the network," Jamie said quietly. "The entire labyrinth. Said I could run it. Said I was meant to." My stomach turned. "What did you say?" I said I'd think about it. Jamie, I wasn't lying. He had the data now. The blueprints. Access points. Names of people she had under her thumb. Politicians. Investors. Enforcers. People who had helped Elise disappear and stay hidden. People who built careers on silence and control. "She has enough to burn governments," Jamie said. "But so do I now." He opened his laptop. Showed me the folder. Project Lyra. Inside, thousands of files, each labeled and time-stamped. Videos of Elise training her daughter. Manipulating her. Making her memorize scripts. Learn new identities. "She thinks she's protecting her," Jamie said. "But she's just passing the infection." "What happens now?" I asked. Jamie stared at the screen. "That's up to Lyra." He sent her a message. Encrypted. No demands. Just one sentence. "You don't have to become her." No response. For 3 days. Then, a video file. Lyra. Sitting cross-legged. Elise behind her. Asleep. "I know who you are," the girl said. Her voice was small, but calm. "I've watched all the footage. You're like me. I'm not supposed to talk to you. But I wanted to." She leaned closer. "Do you want to play a game?" Lyra's video was 36 seconds long. It played once, then self-deleted. But it was enough. That one line, "Do you want to play a game?" wasn't a question. It was a challenge. The kind that isn't made with childish whim, but calculation. It wasn't just mimicry. It was inheritance. A warped echo of Elise, sharpened into something younger, faster, and far more dangerous. "She's already ahead of where I was at her age," Jamie said quietly. "She's not guessing. She's testing me." I felt cold. Not fear for myself. Not even for Jamie. But for the world, if Elise succeeded in turning that girl into her final creation. Jamie built a separate environment, an isolated sandbox server for Lyra's game. A digital playground without borders, filled with decoys, puzzle layers, choice trees. Not to trap her, but to see how she thought. and the results were staggering. She bypassed all child locks, cracked 2 of Jamie's custom algorithms in under 10 minutes, rewrote the logic of the game to test him back, even left behind notes. Little riddles. Mocking, almost affectionate. Why did the fox not eat the rabbit? What happens when the mirror learns to reflect lies? If the house burns down, and the match was never struck, was it still fire? Jamie stared at the screen like he was looking at his own childhood refracted through glass. She's learning faster than I did. She's rewriting the rules. And then came the second video. Elise, staring directly into the lens. Her expression unreadable. You shouldn't have involved Lyra. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. Less commanding. Like something had cracked beneath the surface. You think this is about revenge? It's not. This is survival. I was trying to protect her from the world that broke you. You don't get to decide how this ends. I do. She leaned forward, almost whispering. Come find us. If you really want to finish this, come and see what I built. Jamie watched it twice, then closed the laptop. I have to go. I stood, my voice barely a breath. She's baiting you. Maybe, he said. But I'm the only one who knows the map. I made it from her own breadcrumbs. I know every layer of the labyrinth, every exit. I put a hand on his shoulder. You're still a kid, Jamie. No, Dad, he said, his voice low. I stopped being a kid the day I realized I was smarter than both of you. We left that night. He didn't ask. I just packed a bag and followed. It felt, right? Like I owed him more than just a shield from Elise's legacy. I owed him witness. The safe house was in Hungary, not where I expected. Remote. Reinforced. Hidden behind a vineyard Elise had bought 5 years ago under a fake Italian conglomerate. We entered through the east wall. The inside was a tomb of technology. Servers. Cameras. Encryption towers. Whiteboards etched with algorithms. Jamie moved like he'd been there before in a dream. And in the center, a single chair. Empty. Waiting. She's gone, he said. But he wasn't surprised. Lyra had left a third message. Scrawled on the whiteboard, beneath a drawing of a rabbit. You're not the only one who knows how to vanish. Beneath it, a USB drive. Jamie hesitated, then plugged it in. It auto-ran a video. Static. Then Lyra's face. No, Elise. I've decided not to play your game anymore, she said, calm, eyes too old for her face. I'm building my own now. Bigger. Quieter. She tilted her head slightly. You tried to rescue me. But maybe I didn't need saving. Maybe you just didn't like the ending Mom wrote for you. And then, the final line, you still don't know the real villain, do you? The screen went black. Jamie didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there, blinking slowly. I wanted to say something. Anything. But he whispered it first. She's right. He pulled out an old folder. One I didn't know he still had. Inside, the very first file Elise ever created on Jamie. A childhood analysis report, not medical, not school-based. Commissioned. Privately. By me. I felt the blood drain from my face. I don't remember that, I said. Jamie stared at me like he was looking through me. You paid for an evaluation when I was 4. You didn't tell Mom. You thought I might be broken. That's the word the psychologist used in her notes. No, I said, shaking my head. I never. You did. It's in the metadata. You emailed her. You asked if there was a way to recalibrate emotional patterning. You didn't want a son. You wanted a product. My knees buckled. I sat down. I forgot. I whispered. I forgot I ever. You started the maze, he said. Not her. Outside, the wind howled. In the server logs, Jamie watched Lyra's signal go dark. And for the first time in his life, I saw him cry. Not for Elise. Not for me. But for the one person left in the game who still had hope. Lyra. We didn't speak for hours after Jamie showed me that file. He sat cross-legged on the floor of Elise's safe house, staring at the darkened screen, the words, you started the maze, looping silently in the air between us. And he wasn't wrong. I'd buried that part of myself deep, in the part of memory that doesn't fade but grows moss. That consultation when Jamie was 4, after his teachers said he didn't connect emotionally with peers. I panicked. I thought something was broken in him. But the truth? It was me. The scared man who couldn't understand the language of silence, who mistook intelligence for isolation, who tried to solve his son like a problem instead of holding him like a boy. I never told Elise about the assessment. She found it anyway. She used it, Jamie said finally. She read the report and didn't try to fix me. She used it to understand me, to turn me into her mirror. I didn't argue. I couldn't. There was no longer a line between what Elise created and what I allowed. I think that's why she built the labyrinth, he added. It wasn't just an escape plan. It was a place for people like us. People built wrong. No one's built wrong, Jamie. He turned to me. Then why were we always being rebuilt? We left the safe house just after midnight. Burned everything. Data. Drives. Maps. Even the chair. We didn't say it aloud, but it was a funeral. Not just for Elise, but for who we had been inside her game. Back in the States, something had shifted. There was a sharpness in the air, like a bowstring pulled taut. Lyra was silent. No trace. But Jamie was certain she was close. Not physically. Strategically. She's hiding in plain sight, he said, setting up his laptop in our basement-turned-war room. Not off-grid. She's too smart for that. She's making noise elsewhere, fake hacks, ghost accounts, AI-generated identities. All of it's distraction. What's the real move then? I asked. He turned the screen toward me. It was a list of names. People Elise had manipulated, blackmailed, people she'd helped and hurt to build her empire. Each had a small, red checkmark beside it. Except one. A man named Richard Mallon, former cybercrime prosecutor, now private consultant, once connected to Elise in her early Everest days. He disappeared 2 years ago, Jamie said. Lyra didn't erase him. She kept him. Why? Because he was mine before he was Elise's. The next day, we flew to Chicago. Mallon lived off-grid in a house wired tighter than a Pentagon black site. Jamie used a pulse mimic to bypass the front gate, and we walked straight into a nest of paranoia. Guns. Panic room. An AI-controlled defense protocol called Cora that scanned us for biometric signatures before letting us pass the threshold. Mallon hadn't aged well. Graying, gaunt, eyes twitching like he saw memories in the corners. I thought you were dead, he said when he saw Jamie. Jamie just smiled. Not yet. You shouldn't be here, Mallon hissed. She's already watching. You don't know what she's become. Tell me. He hesitated. Then he opened the door to a back room. And there she was. Lyra. On screen. Not live or recorded. Mr. Mallon, you're very clever. But not clever enough to see what I'm building. You think I'm Elise's daughter. But she didn't make me. I chose to become this. You all built the house. But I rewired the walls. And now I'm going to decide who gets to stay in it. Mallon turned, terrified. She's not trying to destroy the system. She wants to replace it. Elise just wanted to survive. Lyra, she wants to rule. Jamie said nothing. Just stared at the screen. I stepped closer. Can we stop her? She doesn't want to be stopped, Jamie said. She wants to be understood. That's why she keeps sending messages. She's not erasing her past. She's curating it. Then what's her next move? Jamie turned back to Mallon. She's going to leak everything. The labyrinth. The safe houses. The names. The crimes. Everything Elise ever touched, built, or burned. She's not protecting a secret anymore, Jamie whispered. She's offering it. To who? To the world. That night, we watched in horror as the first leak dropped. One file. Just one. Titled, J. Varnell, the boy who knew too much. The file spread like wildfire. It started on an obscure whistleblower forum, the kind that breathes in secrecy and bleeds into conspiracy. Then it hit Reddit. Then Twitter. Then the darknet, where it grew teeth and claws, where people who knew how to dig realized something devastating. The boy in the file wasn't a story. He was real. And he had a name. Jamie Varnell. It wasn't just surveillance logs or transcripts anymore. Lyra had compiled a psychological profile so detailed it made Jamie's contingency files look amateur. Birth records. Hacked school assessments. Redacted government reports. Even the audio from the old psychological evaluation I commissioned all those years ago, the one I'd buried under passwords and guilt. Worse still, she'd added her own commentary. A soft, deliberate voice overlaying the footage. This is what happens when you raise a mind like a weapon. You don't just lose your child. You create your replacement. He was meant to inherit a house of pain, but now he decides who burns inside it. The world didn't know what to do with it. Was it real? Was it fiction? A viral art project? A warning? Comment threads exploded. Conspiracy theorists hailed Jamie as a child genius turned digital assassin. Others said it was all AI. A hoax. A provocation. A message. The scariest part? Jamie didn't deny any of it. They see me now, he said, eyes locked on the laptop. She forced the mask off. She exposed everything, Jamie, I said. Your name. Your life. Your mind. He shrugged. She gave me control by pretending to take it. I didn't understand at first. Then he turned the laptop toward me. A second file had appeared, hidden beneath the first. Titled, E. Varnell, The Matriarch's Autopsy. It was Lyra's final betrayal. Not of Jamie, but of Elise. Inside, the full archive of Everest. Videos of Elise orchestrating offshore fraud. Wiretaps of her threatening whistleblowers. Recordings of her admitting to emotional manipulation and staged psychological abuse. It wasn't a leak. It was a murder. Digitally. Legally. Irrevocably. Lyra had destroyed her own mother. Why? I whispered. She worshipped Elise. She became her. Jamie shook his head. She became more. And when she was done using Elise's story, she deleted it. For days, media outlets scrambled to verify. Governments launched inquiries. Former clients of Elise fled. A few were arrested. Others vanished. And through it all, Lyra said nothing more. Until the third file dropped. A video. Both of them. Jamie and Lyra. Together. It had been recorded during his time in the labyrinth. I hadn't known. He never told me. But they'd met. Face to face. He sat on one side of a chessboard. She sat on the other. A digital hourglass between them, counting down. Why expose me? Jamie asked. Because secrets don't rot in the dark anymore, Lyra replied. They go viral. You could have disappeared. I didn't want to disappear. She moved a pawn. I wanted to be seen. Not as her daughter. As her sequel. Jamie frowned. And what about me? Lyra looked directly into the lens. You were the prologue. I paused the video there. I couldn't breathe. Jamie sat across from me, watching himself watch her. She played me. No, he said. She chose me. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. From awe. From a slow, rising understanding of the monster we both made. Elise raised her in shadows. But we lit the match. Every betrayal, every silence, every test, every file Jamie created, Lyra watched and learned. Not to copy him. To surpass him. And now? She'd rewritten the whole damn narrative. The final twist came in a note. Handwritten. Delivered to our door at dawn. From Lyra. This story is too big for heroes or villains. It needs an ending only one of us can write. Come to the house in Prague. The one with the red door. I'll be waiting. Jamie looked at me. His face was calm. Resolved. I have to go. I nodded. I know. But this time, he said, you don't follow me. You don't try to fix anything. Why? Because I'm not walking into a trap. He paused. I'm walking into a mirror. He left at sunrise. No goodbyes. No final glances. Just the steady rhythm of his footsteps down the driveway, backpack slung over one shoulder, the cold light of morning chasing his shadow. I watched him disappear through the window, knowing I would never see the same boy again. And maybe I never had. Maybe the boy I thought I knew was only ever the outline. The real Jamie, the one shaped by secrets, by data, by betrayal, was stepping into something bigger now. Something Elise started. Something Lyra wanted to finish. The house in Prague stood alone on a narrow street lined with sycamores. Red door. No number. A rusted knocker shaped like a swan. Jamie arrived just after dark. Alone. The camera feed came through a hidden stream he'd set up in his glasses. His voice came through my laptop, soft, clear, steady. I'm inside, he whispered. The foyer was sparse. White walls. Black floors. A single photograph on the wall, Elise holding a baby wrapped in a violet shawl. No lights. Just candle glow. And at the end of the hall, her. Lyra. She was older than before. Only a year had passed, maybe less, but something had hardened. She stood barefoot, hair tied back, wearing a gray sweater far too big for her. Her eyes were as unreadable as ever. Hello, Jamie, she said. He didn't answer. She led him through a doorway, down a corridor lined with old server towers. Silent now. Just settling on forgotten networks. The labyrinth wasn't just shut down. It was dead. This place was never meant to last, Lyra said. It was just a cocoon. And what did you become? Jamie asked. She turned slowly. The thing that survives the fire. They entered a final room. Round. Dome ceiling. In the center, a table with 2 chairs. On it, 2 envelopes. One with Jamie's name. One with hers. Jamie sat. Lyra sat opposite. No computers. No screens. Just paper. I wanted you to see what choice looks like, she said. Jamie opened the envelope. Inside, a contract. A digital key code. One that unlocked every remaining cash from Elise's empire. Every off-grid account. Every access point. You could run it all, Lyra said. Become the ghost everyone fears. The one no one can catch. Finish what Elise started, only better. Jamie didn't even blink. You think I want this? I think you don't know what you want. He slid the envelope back. Burn it. Lyra tilted her head. You think walking away means you win? No, Jamie said softly. I think walking away means you lose. And then he opened her envelope. Inside, a photo. The two of them from months before, playing chess in the labyrinth. And behind it, a USB drive. Jamie froze, because he recognized the serial code. It was his contingency, the one he'd wiped. She'd restored it. All your moves, she whispered. All your secrets. I didn't just learn from Elise. I learned from you. Jamie stared at her. A long silence. Then, why? Lyra leaned forward, eyes shimmering in the candlelight. Because I wanted to prove I could beat you. That I didn't need her, or you, or anyone to give me a crown. She stood, calm. I took it. Jamie looked down at the drive, then back at her. No, he said. You didn't take anything. Lyra frowned. What? I gave it to you. She blinked, and then the lights flickered. Jamie's voice echoed softly, no longer from the stream, but the room itself. You weren't the only one recording. I knew you cloned my archive. I left something inside it. Her eyes widened. A logic bomb, he said. Smart enough to stay hidden. Dumb enough to act like yours. You wouldn't. It's already done. The house went dark. All servers dead. All accounts zeroed. Every trace of Elise's empire vanished. Lyra's networks. Her shadows. Her control. Gone. Jamie stood slowly. This was never a game, he said. It was a mirror. You saw what you wanted in me. I saw what I could have become in you. She shook, furious. Eyes wet. You destroyed everything. No, he said. I freed us from it. Lyra didn't scream. Didn't beg. She just sat. Silent. Small again. Jamie left through the red door. Didn't look back. He returned 2 days later. Skinny. Pale. But his eyes clearer than I'd ever seen. I asked him one question. Is it over? He nodded. And then he handed me the final file. A short note. Written in his hand. The house has burned. The ghosts are gone. I am no one's mirror now. Jay. There were no heroes here. Only survivors. The woman who built the labyrinth. The boy who walked through it. The girl who almost turned it into a kingdom. And me. The father who watched from the outside, helpless, as the children tore down the world we gave them. Sometimes redemption isn't about being forgiven. It's about stopping the story before someone else inherits your sins. And Jamie? He didn't become Elise. He became something else. Free.